That's a great question. So the question is, how do you stay neutral when you're listening to your client and you feel that you have the same issue or you have a similar experience and something is stirred up, right, in the session? So how do you detach yourself? How do you stay neutral? And how do you stay impartial and objective? So that's your question, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question. And I will start answering the question by sharing a story, funny story, and then I will share my experience of what helps me. Okay. I mentor coaches, right? And I mentor coaches on an individual basis and in the corporate setting. So I was with this retail company. So we had this internal coaching system. We created an internal coaching system by training leaders as coaches, and then they coach their employees. They coach like others in the organization. It was part of a big change management initiative in the organization. So I was mentoring them also. In one of the mentoring sessions in a group setting, one of the managers brought a recording. And then in the recording, the individual, the coachee, was sharing his challenge with anger management. Did I share this story with you, by the way? No, okay. Maybe it was in another group. Yeah. So coach listens, nods, and doesn't say anything, and then the coachee shares about what happens to him when he's angry, and he gets angry very quickly. He gets angry with his team members and sometimes yells at them, and and it doesn't look good in a corporate environment. And then the coaches listened and listened, nodded, and at the end the coach said, I have this book. I think it's very useful. You should read this book. And then just gave some homework, like read this book, watch this movie, and then he said, our session is over. And then we finished listening, and then I asked, so why didn't you ask? Why didn't you help him process that anger? And he said, I have the same issue. So I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to stay impartial and neutral. So we're humans, right? The first thing that helps us is self-compassion. So, okay, my client, the individual that I'm coaching, has this issue. I have this issue, which means that there is an unfinished business with that issue, or there is something going on in your life, right? But remember and remind yourself, this is their space. And then you have this very brief self-dialogue, and you said, as if that whatever comes to you is a person, and say, so I heard you, but we will talk about this later. We will process this after the session. Now it's not my time. Now is the time of this person. This is their time, and I want to be useful. I will park this. We will talk about this. We will process this after the session. Okay, let's go back to the coach position, coach presence.
You mean you say that very quickly to Talyaa?
To Talyaa, that inner voice that, comes up.
That's brilliant.
Of course, you say it internally. You don't just, say it loud. Yeah, you have that dialogue inside. Okay, we will process this. I trust. Thank you. Let's park this. Now, this is not my time. This is my client's time. How can I be of service? If you try to suppress it, it will keep getting louder. But if you acknowledge that voice, whatever, and or that emotion, that feeling comes, just acknowledge, have a little mini conversation, and then go back to your coaching presence. I mean, we are humans, right? So even if you remember, I don't know if you're spiritual or if you ever followed Rumi, Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi, he said, come again. So coming back to coach presence is like that. Okay, I went off track, but I can always come back. And then as you keep practicing, it won't happen. You will become really master that presence? That's a great question. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you.
And Shona?
Maybe a follow-up question. Yes. Are there people or clients that have come to you that you've decided, I can't coach this person? Has that occurred? Or
Yeah.
And I don't know if you share anything on that point.
Yeah, that's a great question too. You have great questions this morning. We should have this more often. So I can't coach is one thing. I mean, if you feel like, no, I can't coach this person, that's okay. That's really okay. That's maturity, right? You're just being honest with yourself. And also, there are times where you might feel like there's no chemistry. And it's okay to say that I don't want to coach this person. It's okay. We just started, an example is that we just started a new project about coaching newcomer women and in Canada. And I told our coaches, it's okay if you don't feel chemistry. Indeed, you would be helping them by just acknowledging that, because we are able to match them with someone else that would have better chemistry or more chemistry with them and more useful. So there were times where I felt like, I'm not the best coach for this person. If I know a few other coaches, and I know many coaches, so I would really propose, and that communication needs to be handled carefully, because sometimes coachees might be thinking, clients might be thinking that you're a good coach for them, whereas you don't feel like you're the best coach for them. So communicate it gently with compassion, and then say, there's really a better coach that will help you better. And it happened recently. A manager, I felt like, and listening to him, I felt like my husband would be a better coach, like really would be more effective with that, coaching. And I approached the HR first and said, would it be okay if we switch the coaches? And then they spoke with him, and then I spoke with him too. So we managed it very carefully, because you're dealing with people's assumptions, and I didn't want him to assume that I didn't want to work with him. But it's okay to have such healthy boundaries. It's a sign of maturity. Okay, shall we start today's class topic? We are already in the class topic. Ready? Yay! Okay. In the last 2 weeks, indeed, we covered some of the elements of communication in coaching, and the most important ones may be ability to ask powerful, creative questions, and of course, listening, and use of silence, and verbal softeners, paraphrasing, rephrasing, and summarizing. So today we will continue with the same topic, and we are adding more and more. Each time we have a class, we add more to our toolbox. I want to talk about what works in effective communication, in interpersonal communication with others. In communication, we use verbal language, and we also use a nonverbal language. And the verbal language is like straightforward, right? It's our words, choice of words, our vocabulary. If we are using a jargon like corporate jargon, for example, or a terminology, that constitutes our verbal communication, verbal language. Nonverbal communication includes our facial expression, our gestures, our tone of voice, and our body, and how our body moves when we listen and as we talk. So that's nonverbal communication. Majority of people, please remember this is really important. Majority of people will remember their experience with us more than our words, more than what we say. They will remember how they feel when they are with us, when they are in our presence. And therefore, it is really important to pay attention to nonverbal communication along with our words. In other words, what we say is important, but how we say sometimes is even more important. and I will share a story with you.
Sorry. But Slavic, wasn't he? About non-verbal communication being more important to the brain. It was one of the 5 axioms.
I don't know. I'm talking about my experience more, but we will come to that too. Yeah, we will come to that. I became a therapist 20 years ago. I received an offer from an institute in Vancouver, and I went there to work as a therapist and complete my education about like ethics and etc. In 2 weeks after I moved to Vancouver, they paired me. They sent me to a school, elementary school, to work as a therapist with children, with kids between the ages of 6 and 12 years old. My English was okay because I worked as an expat for many years before that. But my English, I spoke a professional language. And working with kids was not in my experience. I was afraid. I was very afraid, that I wouldn't understand their language, their slang. And then I told myself, what you know about kids is that they respond to your emotions, they respond to your presence. So I opened all of my senses, like 5 senses, and then my intuition, really, really fully, with my full capacity, my desire to give them that space and to understand them was so huge. And I will be honest, a lot of times I didn't understand their slang because these kids were like 6 years old, 7-year-old, like 9-year-old. So I didn't understand sometimes. But then I repeated, that doesn't important. What is important is that how they feel in my presence. It kept going like this, and I started to understand them better and better and better. But when we came to the end of the relationship, we always have this closure sessions, and I had my closure sessions one by one with my clients. And then there was this I wasn't speaking with an 11-year-old. I was speaking with a guru or someone that he made me feel like, oh my God, such a wisdom. So that lesson sticked to me, like stayed with me. He really felt understood in my presence, and that was not the verbal language because my English skills were not like the native person's English skills, but my nonverbal language was there, present. It's very important that we are aware of this. And coming to your point, Marcos, is in interpersonal communication, people will remember, this is an old, data. I'm sure with the internet and everything, it has changed, but there is no recent data that I'm aware of. So it's believed that, or the science told us that, the research told us that 7% of our spoken words are remembered, whereas 38% of the voice, the tone is remembered, and 55% of the body language is remembered. These days, with the internet, and doing this with you, you don't see my full body language, right? But what you see is my face. So I would say the facial expression, maybe some gestures, and the tone of voice have gained more weight and become more important in personal communication. So the reason why we are so sensitive to tone of voice is related to how our brain works. Our emotional brain, which is part of our survival system, is sensitive to auditory stimulus, processes information. The emotional brain, part of the limbic system, processes information through auditory. And if you think about babies, those of you who are parents, I'm sure you have observed your babies, your toddlers, that before they learned to speak, they react to their mother's tone. They react and they respond. I tested this with my daughter a lot of times. My daughter's name is Ada. If I say like, Adacığım, sweetheart, she would just smile. And if I said like, Ada, she would just look at me like this. She knew that, even without saying words, she knew that I was saying something different. And she didn't speak at that time. So additionally, the emotional brain processes information by listening to the tone of voice because it's auditory. The additional thing about the emotional brain is that it also is sensitive to hierarchy. Imagine that, your manager calls you and says, I'm still waiting for those sales reports that I asked you to send me last week. And your emotional brain, which is part of the subconscious system, just starts to scan like, am I safe or is this a threat? Because emotional brain works in the terms of either or. Either I'm safe or not, or there's a threat to my existence, to my well-being. So imagine that your manager calls you and uses a different tone of voice and says, hi, Joanne, I'm still waiting for the sales reports that I reflex, right? Emotional brain is not only responsible for our survival together with the reptilian brain, but it is also responsible for our emotional growth, emotional evolution, and emotional intelligence. We evolve emotionally as we feel safe. Therefore, psychological safety is so important. Psychologists have been talking about it for years now. Emotional brain wants to belong. That's existential. We really want to belong. That's why your tone of voice is so important, and it works as an invitation to the subconscious mind of the individual, telling them that it is their safe space to be themselves, and you're there to partner with them, to help them grow, to facilitate progress. They know subconsciously that you are an important part of their support system and you're part of their growth team. That is why the tone of voice, how we say things along with what we say, and our facial expression, our body language, very important in interpersonal communication. Any comments or questions here?
I love that just coming from that very, very intentionally and consciously, that we evolve emotionally as we feel safe. Wow, that just powerfully hit me. And especially with my mom, I just watch everything. She popped up for me because I always feel like in almost every situation, she's had so much trauma that she lives on the edge, not feeling safe. If I'm coming from, this is your safe space to be yourself, and I'm here to partner with you. Like, I'm here to walk alongside you in that. That's kind of what I heard you saying, was that that's kind of the place to come from with people that you're coaching. Actually, pretty much everybody, if I can be that for somebody.
Yeah. I mean,
what a gift.
Yeah, thank you. Growing up, we will, by the way, have a class about motivation levels, which is adapted from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's unique to flow, but it has its base and foundation in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. As we grow up, let's say as a kid, the dynamics in the family are safe and healthy, helping us to grow and nurture our temperament, nurture our strengths, nurture our characteristics, then it prepares us for the next stage of our evolution or our development. As we grow up, there are stages of development, right? So you feel ready to almost like, for the next stage of your development. However, in most families, including myself, we don't have an ideal situation, right? So there will be always something that appears either to be affecting our growth or our perception of some memory will be painful, like that's our perception. It might not be the full reality, right? So we have those wounds or memories or like painful memories, but the good thing is that we can always change those memories and always evolve. But parenting is so important. Teachers are very important, friends are very important, and coaches are, and counselors and therapists. This support system is very important, helping us to grow emotionally. Very important. Wonderful. So then I keep telling you about the tones of voice. What are those tones of voices that I'm telling you? In personal communication, if we want to influence others, and especially in a coaching relationship, we speak about 4 different tones of voice. And the first one is a wise person tone, and the second one is friend's tone, the third one is appreciative tone, and the fourth one is assertive tone. So a wise person tone is a deep, transcendent, and almost like hypnotic, and it's slow and it pauses. An example is, what about becoming a coach is important for you? What about that is important for you? We have about 30 minutes together. What would be the best outcome that you would like to achieve? And you pause. I will send this to you, by the way. Don't worry, I will send this to you. I mean, the state that what helps me is to switch to the wise person tone is I really want the person to think, to go deeper, to reflect, and to explore. Find the answers within themselves. That's my intention. And that intention helps me to use this tone. It comes to me naturally because my intention is really to help them to think and go deeper and really feel enabled and encouraged and empowered to explore their own answers. That's the intention. And the friend tone is it's obvious, right? Hey, how are you? It's a warm, it's a genuine, it's a meeting tone. What's going on? How is life going? And the appreciative tone is really, again, your intention is you appreciate the person, you appreciate the individual, you appreciate your client because they shared a lot with you. They were so brave. They really explored those deeper waters within themselves. So you listen and you appreciate and you say, thank you very much for sharing your value of justice with me. Now I understand better why you want to work on your leadership skills. It's about thanking them. And the assertive tone, we don't use this tone very often. And we only use it if the client is not maybe committing their actions, just in a constant complaining or venting mode instead of taking action. And a possible use of this tone could be, we've been talking about this goal from the very beginning, and I really wonder if this goal is still important to you. So just, pushing a little bit gently, but it's not like we've been talking about this goal from the very beginning. I wonder if this goal is still important for you. It's not that, well, our intention is not to just put it in their face. It's really about just still supporting them, maybe just giving them a gentle push. And don't use this tone, this assertive tone, if the relationship and trust is not there yet from the very beginning. Any questions?